and training update from HQ.
Yeah, no problem, thank you. And to Andy, it was great to see a photograph of Tate Nottingham Trent, particularly Jeff Plant standing on the right-hand side of that. God bless him, he's gone now, but without him I wouldn't be here. I suspect a lot of other people who found him very inspirational wouldn't be around either. The other thing I would also say I would echo what Andy has said to you, and that is, I came into lecturing in environmental health because someone gave me the opportunity to come and do a bit of part-time teaching as an EHP. And I would encourage any of you to do that. So take what he said seriously. There's an offer there, take him up on it. I'm here to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about something which Andy also alluded to, and that's the CIEH Education Review. It's a little bit about a misnomer, because it's not just about producing the next generation of EHPs. This review is root and branch. It's a root and branch look at how we educate and we develop the next generation of professionals within environmental health. So, to talk about an education review, a slight misnomer. In terms of what we're doing, well, this is what we're doing, and I'll talk to you about some of the background commissioning, the terms of reference, the evidence gathering, and all of that sort of stuff. I'll talk to you very briefly about that. But there are some stark realities that I want to begin with. The primary reason that we're doing this probably goes back, well, it's been around probably for about the last 10 years. When I was teaching at Nottingham Trent University in the mid-90s, we saw a collapse first of all, we saw a collapse in the numbers of people wanting to study environmental health. And that was directly on the back of a television programme at the time called The Life of Grime. Some of you will remember that. And our numbers at Nottingham Trent at that time collapsed from, we have somewhere in the order of 400 to 500 applications for 40 places at Nottingham Trent alone each year. And we would take on a maximum of 40 students. From Life of Grime Season 1 airing, that collapsed to something like Nottingham Trent getting around 80 applications. Overnight, they went. And then, as time has gone on, what has also happened, and it's been a recurring thing, this is not something new that only kicked in the financial crash of 2008, cutbacks in local government has been a constant theme for years. Our education system for producing the next generation of environmental health practitioners relies on a placement. We have a placement not because CIEH dreamed it up one day as a suitable hurdle to put students through and a little bit of pain to inflict on the road to qualification. The reason that placement was there and the assessments that go along with it were put along with it. So it started with logbook, it went on to ELP, it's become PPP, we've had professional exams, we're now into integrated professional assessments, professional interviews. All of that came from government that wrote to CIEH in the mid-1990s and said, we are no longer going to be prepared to let EHPs deal with food or health and safety unless we can be satisfied that upon qualification they've had the opportunity to integrate theory and practice and the level of attainment of that integration has been assessed. So for us, a placement is absolutely crucial. But the government requires it. The government still requires it, but doesn't fund it to the value of 1 penny. Unlike the other professions broadly related to health. So if you're a social worker, or you're a student social worker, your placement is funded, and it's paid for by government. If you're a student health visitor, the same is true. Student midwifery, exactly the same, but not us. Government requires it, but doesn't fund it. The funding of it is carried by every single student and every single member of the Chartered Institute, and every single organisation that carries a student is prepared to take a student. Therein lies the problem. This is why we're even here talking about this. Because, particularly over the last 10-15 years, those number of those placements has absolutely collapsed. And particularly post-2008, and I have to tell you that with the autumn statement, the Chancellor's autumn statement today, and the financial settlement for local government that's coming next week, the predictions at the moment is that local government finances are going to get even tighter. We are still attracting into environmental health, to BSc and MSc courses in environmental health, somewhere in the order of 400 to 500 students each year. But, colleagues, we have placements for probably less than 80 of those 400 to 500. That is the stark reality in 2014, staring into 2015. And in terms of the whole numbers that go through the sausage machine of qualification, we're probably qualifying no more than 30%. 70% of the students that elect to do BSc and MSc Environmental Health are not completing the qualification for whatever reason, and the primary reason is the issue of placements. That's why we're here, that's why we're doing this. Local government is still the big provider of employment and placements for environmental health practitioners. The numbers of placements and opportunities for students in the private sector, or indeed in the charity sector, commonly known as the third sector, is minimal. We're here because of that collapse. So, what are we doing? What are we finding? Well, the aim of the review is to do this, to deliver a reconsideration of how we produce and develop the next generation of professionals. Very simple, very straightforward. The objectives, in best dissertation style, to review the curriculum and processes, etc., to meet the diverse needs of the employment marketplace over the next 5 to 10 years. That's our brief, to focus on the needs of the marketplace. Remembering, colleagues, that the marketplace, the dominant marketplace, is still local government. And through that whole process, to establish an educational continuum from the vocational through to the higher postgraduate professional. That's what we're about. There is a working group that is leading this, and for once CIEH has brought in someone independent to chair it and to drive it. The chair is a guy called Nick Wilson. He's Strategic Director for Services for Children, Schools and Families with Surrey County Council. Nick does have a slight advantage in this. Whilst he's doing that job, and he's done that job for a better part of 20 years, he started as an environmental health officer. So he has an understanding of what we're about, but he has none of the baggage of the last 20 odd years. And he understands and is driving this hard. In terms of who else is on the working group, well, there's representatives from the universities, from the student collective, student body, from the employers, both public and private, from the CIEH government system, Board of Trustees, Professional Standards and Policy Committee, Qualification Standards Committee, so on and so forth. Government departments are also brought into this through the Food Standards Agency, Health and Safety Exec, so on and so forth. Everyone at the moment is playing a part within the working group. The working group started by saying, to do this, we need to do some research. We need some real evidence. Not just a case of Tony Lewis or Chris Day or whoever else it is, sitting in a darkened room and writing down the thesis of how we think it is. What the group says is they want some real evidence. And they want evidence concerning these things. What's the current landscape like? What is the qualification process really like? What do the academic providers have to say? What do the students have to say? What's the cost-benefit analysis around the whole process? And how do we compare with other professions? That's the starting point. That was the starting point that's been imposed by the working group undertaking this review. And gathering this information has been something that we've now been engaged in for probably the last 4 or 5 months. How have we got this information? Well, the column on the right starts to give details of how we've got it. But if it is it's no exaggeration for me to say this is probably the biggest piece of real evidence-based research that CIEH has engaged in a long, long time. We have conducted hundreds of interviews, semi-structured, structured, focus groups. We've had hundreds of responses to surveys. We've talked to dozens of academic colleagues. We've talked to a lot of students, a lot of newly qualified, a lot of more experienced environmental health practitioners, and a lot of managers and employers. The consensus view from talking to everyone was, had circumstances not changed, had local government finance been healthy, had the country not gone through what we've gone through between 2008 and today in terms of the depression, recession, whatever you want to call it, then the means by which we currently prepare EHPs to practice is broadly entirely appropriate. That's what the consensus view was. However, the recognition is there. The evidence shows it, that circumstances have changed. And frankly, colleagues, we can't carry on doing what we're doing at the moment. The evidence has given us this vivid account, a really vivid account, of the nature of the circumstances that have changed and why we must act, and we will act fairly decisively to maintain the credibility primarily of the profession and of environmental health professionals within it. So the one thing that I can absolutely say that will come out of this research, that will come out of this review, is fundamental change. We cannot carry on as we are. Where have we got to then, so far? Well, we've gathered the evidence has been gathered, it's been pulled together, it's been compiled within a scoping report that currently runs to some 360 odd pages, together with detailed analysis of interviews, focus groups, so on and so forth. The themes that come out of it are these: that the current landscape for environmental health is hugely problematic. I'm not using the term challenging, which is the normal euphemism that we might use on these occasions. It's problematic. If you're working within environmental health, you probably know that. There has been some work recently, in the last 12 months, conducted by the Local Government Association. And they brought in an independent person, a lady called Wendy Hirsch, from the Institute of Professional Development, to do this for them. And she conducted what she termed quick and dirty research between about this time last year and February of this year into the state of local government in terms of how it was going to produce the next generation of regulators. That's what the LGA brief was. So it covered environmental health, it covered training standards, and it also covered the licensing profession as well. The outcomes of that piece of research are absolutely in line with what we've found. The landscape is problematic. the picture, certainly across England, is hugely varied. In some parts of England, local authorities have come through the recession almost unscathed. In other parts, they've been absolutely decimated. In some parts of England, local authorities are still offering placements and training for environmental health students, and for some of those placements, they're still paid. And the feedback that's coming back from some of those employers is, we can't get students to take them. In other parts of the country, redundancies, cutbacks, no training budget, no professional development budget, no placements. Hugely mixed. I was talking to the Welsh training officers last week, was it, Charlie?
Yeah, that's right.
And hearing about the position in Wales. And some of the reports that have come out of the Welsh Government Audit Office, looking into the state of environmental health in Wales. Very similar. Northern Ireland at the moment going through the mix as well because of the reorganisation of local governments in Northern Ireland. So the landscape for environmental health, certainly with England, Wales, Northern Ireland, hugely problematic. We know that our problems stem from a lack of training opportunities. We also know that another key themes that have come out from the evidence is the view of the existing qualification process, and note the divergence here. Remember the consensus view that I talked about 10 minutes ago? If circumstances had not changed, everything was fine and dandy. But the main themes that come out of, one of the main themes that's come out of the actual evidence is, in the current climate, the process itself is too burdensome, it's too costly, it's too difficult, it's not what the market wants. And bearing in mind what Andy said, what he's trying to do here at Wolverhampton, which is in some respects in contrast with this, because what the research is showing is that newly qualified EHPs are ill prepared to carry out real-life environmental health work, and they particularly lack soft skills. So if Andy's doing what he said he's doing here, at least he's turning things to a direction that the evidence gathering that's taken place over the last 4 or 5 months shows there is a need to address. The evidence also turns its attention significantly on the higher education institutions, the universities and colleges. What the employers are saying is that the practical and professional requirements of the qualification, in other words, the degree and what is required by the current placement, should be contained within a single degree programme. Get rid, they're saying, of the placement. That's what the employers are saying. But bear in mind what I said to you. Going back to the 1990s, the government said we're not prepared to accept newly qualified EHPs who have not had the opportunity to integrate theory and practice through a placement, and that placement must be assessed. So there's a real divergence there. The employers saying, we don't want it, we think it should be done as part and parcel of the degree. The government still maintaining the placement should be there. How do we balance some of these things? Research is also showing that they wish to see a greater practical content incorporated into the degree. But at the same time, if you're starting to look at the future for us as a profession, you can't escape that the one area where there is money, where there is funding, and to which we are historically wed, is public health. And yet when I talk to our colleagues at Public Health England, what they're saying to me is, what we're more concerned about is the higher level skills, the higher level analysis that goes with public health. we don't see, frankly, public health practitioners, public health specialists engaging in the deeply practical. They're there to manage others who do that. So again, you've got this dichotomy. Part of our world is saying we want this, and part of our world is saying, no, do that. How do we reconcile this? The research is saying we need different qualification routes to suit different circumstances. A one-size-fits-all approach can no longer be sustained. All of this is coming out, and we're now starting to see that there is some incompatibility, even, between the needs of the marketplace with the objectives and structures of higher education institutions. If I talk to many universities that we've historically dealt with, and Andy raised Nottingham Trent Polytechnic, back in the days where I started, and certainly started my teaching career, Trent Polytechnic ran an environmental health degree programme consistently for over 50 odd years. They pulled it. They closed it. They closed it a couple of years ago. On the basis was, we no longer want as a university to be seen to be running what they termed hard hat programmes. They regarded them as incompatible with a university. They felt that hard hat programmes should be confined or consigned to further education colleges. They're not the only ones, colleagues. We've lost Salford University. Salford University has closed as an environmental health provider. 50 odd years continuous provision at Salford, gone. We've lost Manchester Metropolitan University, where I started my teaching career. Again, many, many years of constant provision gone. We've come perilously close to losing Northumbria. All for the same reasons. The philosophical approach of the university is incompatible with the product that we want producing. So again, how do we resolve some of these dichotomies? And I hate to mention it, colleagues, given the needs of the marketplace, there are views out there that we've gathered as part of this research that's basically saying there are too many universities in a crowded market. Now, for me to come to a university and say that, or more importantly, stand up in front of our academics forum in that next February or March and say that, I'd be hung, drawn and quartered. It's not me saying it, it's what the research is showing currently. The working group received that initial scoping report and they packed us off to gather more data. They said, the working group said, we need more information about student expectations. Student expectations versus the real world, realisation. Here's a quote that's come out. One quote, but it could equally have been dozens of others, because there were similar quotes from a student. I feel I have been missold a career and a degree. That's not something I want to hear from any of us. Working group also said they want to know more about career pathways. They want to know what do people on qualification really go on to do. What's open to us? We know that they're many and varied, the working group said, but we still feel that they're focused on producing a product for local government. Is that the continuing reality, and will it be so for the next 5 to 10 years? Working group also said because we need to know more about the extent of changes to local government. They said it was hard to deny a crisis is looming for all with an interest in environmental health. That's what the evidence was showing, that's what the working group has said. And in that respect, the working group has asked us to go out and conduct a financial evaluation of local government. It's not something I expected to do. But I've got to go and do it because, as I say, the working group are really going to town on this and looking at the picture, broad picture, of what surrounds our profession. Now, at this point, you might say, hand out the razor blades, let's have it all done and over with now. Yeah, dead easy to think that. Because along with every problem, along with every time of crisis, there is always opportunity. And there is. And there's lots of it. And believe it or not, there's lots of money out there. I've already alluded to some of it, and it's tied up with public health. Health education in England has somewhere in the order of £1 billion to invest in the broad health-related workforce. Clearly, we would like some of that. There is opportunity out there. But I think in terms of going forward, the education system, the postgraduate professional development system, will have to look quite different over the next 5 to 10 years. That does not mean that we sell off the family silver. The family silver still is BSc, MSc Environmental Health. We are still a degree profession. We have to be a degree profession, and we have to be a degree profession because we are not just Little England. We sit in an international market. And when we look to our colleagues, be it in the United States or Australia or in the Middle East or the Far East or the rest of Europe, the Nordic countries, they are all degree qualified professionals. They have the highest level of skills, and in respect of our international dealings, whether it be in food or environmental protection or public health, then that's the expectation that our colleagues are at that level. So there is a family silver and we're hanging on to it, but there will be change. There is no question about that. The scoping report has now been turned into a summary report. That 360 odd pages has been condensed into about 140. The working group is still chewing its way through some of this, and as of Friday, asked us for even more information. It was my intention that this process would now be drawing to some kind of close, and we'd be going into the new year in a period of consultation. That will come. It may just take a little longer than I originally anticipated. With all members and stakeholders in the spring of 2015. And colleagues, that's it. That's where we are. It's the background to it. It's what we're doing. It's why we're doing it. Remember, though, the opportunity. Not the threat, but the opportunity that is there for the future of environmental health, education, and professional development. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions, briefly. Anybody got a question? One over here. At the front, maybe. Just at the front right.
Hi, I'm Kate Coventry City Council. More of a comment really. I mean, you mentioned about all the students who want to do environmental health, and then on the other hand, you've been telling us about the cuts in government, and the face of government is changing really, really quickly, so there's always a danger that any research you do will very quickly be out of date. But I come from one of those local authorities that are in increasingly not using environmental health. The only environmental health officers are those of us who've been there 25, 30 years, or in food, as you mentioned, and we're running management now. They're not employing environmental health officers. There is no requirement, even in my job now as a manager, or of any of the other posts that I have, to be a qualified environmental health officer. I just wondered how that's going to be factored in for the future.
That is something that the working group is well aware of. There is evidence, a lot of evidence, of similar practice. It's not just Coventry, but similar practice certainly around England. And that is something that is being factored into the review. I can't say to you right now what the outcome of it's going to be, what the options are going to be surrounding it. But I can say that what we're doing here is not so much an education review, as a review of environmental health. I think you can't divorce the two. And certainly the conversation that I had with Nicholas, the chair of the working group, on last Friday, he was saying to me, you know, we can do all of this in isolation. We can come up with new systems and processes and what have you. And we can sling it all down and we can change it. But unless you know where this profession is going, and there is a clear view for it, then doing the education review, you can just turn around and say, well, so what? So, bit by bit, the evidence that is being gathered here is pointing us in a direction, and the direction is this is a much broader review of environmental health. Certainly with England, I have to qualify myself these days about that, because if I go over to Wales or I go to Northern Ireland, my colleagues Jude Barrett will go to the farm and say, hang on a minute, it's not quite the same. So I can't give you an answer that you're looking for right now, except to say the review's open and is well aware of that and considering it.
Any other questions?
I just want to say, that's news to me about the FSA and then remove the requirement to be a qualified EHH through certain ways and code practice. What will the CIEH do in relation to government bodies to make sure that our profession is recognised and appreciated?
It's a consultation at the moment from the Food Standards Agency. It's not to remove the qualifications requirement, it's to tone it down a bit. What it's not specifically mentioning is the certificate of registration. That's been taken out of it. On that specific issue, as we have with others, but on that specific issue, we have been talking to the Food Standards Agency, arguing and falling out with the Food Standards Agency over this now for the last 18 months. We reached the point probably 12 months ago where we threatened to pull out of any negotiation on this. Things got really tetchy. FSA came back and said, okay, we'll take on board your concerns. And at each stage with the discussion with the Food Standards Agency, they've said, yeah, we'll take on board your concerns. And then when you get to the next iteration of their proposals, they've just gone back to where they started. I have to say to you, I am very disappointed in what has come out of the consultation. We are drafting our response to it, and it's not going to be chummy and nice, and we will be seeking support from all colleagues within the membership and beyond for the line that we're taking. Those discussions, those robust discussions that have taken place with the Food Standards Agency, take place with all of the other government departments and agencies. I would like to think they listen to us, and for most part they do, and they certainly engage with us. The Food Standards Agency on this one set out with an agenda and has been rigorously pursuing that agenda. And they have diluted it very little over the last 18 months. Why? Because they take the view, as does government, that it does not like regulation. It sees regulation as a restriction on economic development and growth. That's the reason why. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Totally agree. We're not, you and I don't totally agree.
But that's probably, I don't know who's sitting down the table when it's
But to some extent, I have to say to you, the government is not listening to that. It is political ideology. They have that data, we give them that data. And it's third-party accredited and supported. The evidence, that exact evidence that you're referring to, but government still goes its way.
I think we'll finish the questions there. We've got another presentation, and there is a period of time after that, if you're going to stay around, Tony. We'll take a few more questions. So thank you very much, Tony. Very interesting and challenging, as always, and difficult times. I've been with environmental health a long time, and we've addressed similar issues over the years, but perhaps it seems more focused now with the economic challenges that are facing us. Thanks very much. Just on housekeeping.